return to this function, we previously had found the critical points and found that this function had these 6 critical points. And I just want to classify them all, if possible, using the second partials test. So I've created this table where I list the critical points. And then the second column I've listed as D, etc. That's because sometimes just knowing what D is enough for us to be able to classify things. In our last example, D was negative, we had a saddle. But if D is positive, I have to look further. I have to look at the sign of the non-mixed partials to know whether I have a max or a min. So the etc. is in case I need more than just the value of D, and then we'll classify as the location of a max, min, saddle, or this test is inconclusive. Okay, so f sub x is 3 minus 3x squared, and f sub y is negative 4y plus 4y cubed. Again, we had found that previously in finding these critical points, but now I need to find my second partials. So f sub xx is going to be negative 6x, and f sub xy will just be 0, because there aren't any y's in this formula. If I look at f sub yx, that's also going to be 0, because there aren't any x's in this formula. And you'll notice, because our second partials are continuous, the mixed second partials are equal. F sub yy is going to be negative 4 plus 12y squared. Okay, so if I take a look at D, which is the determinant of f sub xx, f sub xy, f sub yx, f sub yy, that's going to be the determinant of negative 6x, 0, 0, negative 4 plus 12y squared. So that's just going to be negative 6x times negative 4 plus 12y squared. And I think I'm going to keep it in that factored form, because that way if I know the sign of each factor, I'll know the sign of things. Okay. Now I've just written out the formula for D. Now I want to evaluate it at these points. If I want to, it would be totally fine to write D of 1, 0, because D, I can see, is a function of x and y. Now, if I plug in 1 and 0, I'm going to get negative 6 for my first factor, negative 4 for my second factor. A negative times a negative would be positive. So I've got D is bigger than 0. Now, that's enough for me to know that I have either a max or a min at this point, but I'd like to know which I have. So then I need to look at the non-mixed partials. So negative 6x, this first factor here was f sub xx. That would be negative 6 times 1. So f sub xx is less than 0. That's telling me that both cross-sectional curves in the plane parallel to xz and parallel to yz, they both would be concave down. That corresponds to the location of a max. So I'm going to say this is the location of a max. Excellent. Let's see what we get at 1, 1. Okay. So this first factor is still going to be negative 6, but now this second factor is negative 4 plus 12 is 8. So that's a negative times a positive. D is less than 0. That's all I need to know to say that this is the location of a saddle. Negative 1, 1. I'm sorry, 1, negative 1. Negative 6x is still negative. When I plug in negative 1, I'm still getting negative 4 plus 12. I'm still getting positive 8. So this is still a negative times a positive. So it's negative, and this is the location of a saddle. All right, let's try negative 1, 0. Now when x is negative 1, that makes negative 6x positive 6. When I plug in 0 for y, the second factor becomes negative 4. So we have a positive times a negative. D is less than 0. This is the location of a saddle. Negative 1, 1. X being negative 1 makes this first factor positive. Y being 1 makes this second factor positive. So D is positive. That's enough to tell me that we have a max or a min. I'd like to know which. So I take a look at this first factor right here. And, sorry, lost my train of thought for a second. Okay, let's see. When x is -1, we said that was going to be positive. So now f sub xx is greater than 0. So both cross-sectional curves in the planes parallel to xz and yz are going to be concave up. That corresponds to where we have a min. So this will be at the location of a min. And our last point. So when I plug in -1 for x, I get +6. When I plug in -1 here, I get +8. A positive times a positive is positive, so d is bigger than 0. Again, f sub xx is still 6, so it's still positive, so this is also the location of a min. So it looks like we have 2 that are locations of a min, 1 is the location of a max, and 3 are locations of saddles. Pretty cool test. I like it.